I killed him. This thing is haunting me. I have to tell the world to release the things inside my heart to get a little relief.
If you're going to go to China and you're going to get a liver transplant during the 3 weeks you are there, then that means someone's going to go schedule an execution, blood type and tissue type the potential executee, and have them ready to go before you need to leave.
We call it a new form of evil on the world. It's never been done by any government in the past, to take a large group of its own people and say, we're going to kill you without any kind of a trial, and we're going to sell your vital organ parts.
Around 1999 there were around 150 transplant centers. 6-7 years later they had 600 transplantation centers. This is an increase by 300% within such a short period of time without an organ donation program.
We went to an industrial scale operation against the Falun Gong community, a peaceful community of 70 to 100 million people targeted by the chairman of the party, and they were killed, as we say, 41,000 transplants by 2006. We can find no other explanation that they were taken from Falun Gong prisoners of conscience who had been convicted of nothing, were put into work camps, were blood tested and so on, and then when somebody came from the United States or Canada, they were taken out of a work camp and were killed, and their organ was flown to the buyer in Shanghai.
The organ transplant industry is in the hands of the military. The People's Liberation Army is responsible for the hospitals, the transportation of body parts, and the sale of them. It is therefore a governmental activity and constitutes genocide under Article 2 of the Genocide Convention.
And where does organ harvesting begin? It starts in the military hospitals. And then the armed police get involved, and in fact it becomes almost competitive between the armed police hospitals and the military hospitals. It is impossible for the Chinese Communist Party not to be watching that activity and blessing that activity.
It was bringing in about $9 or $10 billion a year, this industrial transplant operation going on across China now. It's a lot of money, a lot of hospitals are financing a lot of their activities through that.
Even within this quite straightforward resolution, there are still problems, because the absolute deluge of propaganda from the regime in Beijing vilifying Falun Gong as some sort of extremist cult. Now, I've met, as I said, hundreds of members of Falun Gong. It is not a sect, it is not a cult, there is no money involved, there is no brainwashing. All the normal characteristics of a cult simply don't exist. These are people who practice their spiritual exercises on their own, and yet, as I said, because between 70 and 100 million people in 1999 were practicing Falun Gong, this was seen by Jiang Zemin, then the leader of the Communist Party, as a threat to his own position. It wasn't, of course, but he saw the opportunity of creating an enemy within. Just as during the war, the Nazis singled out the Jews as a special characteristic and did what they did to the Jews. The same is happening today to Falun Gong in China. That is why it is genocide. That's why I say it's so serious.
I strongly believe that the 17-year campaign to eradicate Falun Gong will be seen as one of the great shames of recent Chinese history.
I think if you're asking about how this comes about in terms of motivation, I think there's a number of factors at play. One of them is compartmentalization. People at different parts don't know what the rest is doing, and this helps to make willful blindness function. People will say, well, I don't know, I see a body in the operating table, I don't know whose body it is, or I see a corpse that I'm cremating, I don't know whose corpse I'm creating, and so on. So that's one thing. Another, of course, is censorship, so that none of this is reported. You can't see through the media what's happening. You don't have the normal sources of information. And a third thing is incitement to hatred. I mean, as I mentioned before, the Communist Party is always making up these enemies, but it doesn't just say, designate somebody or some group as an enemy, they start these propaganda campaigns. And that was certainly true with Falun Gong, which depersonalizes, dehumanizes, marginalizes these people to the point where the few people who actually see and know what's going on, they'll say, well, Falun Gong are enemies, Falun Gong are not people, we can do whatever we want with them. And of course there's the greed factor, all this money that's being poured into it, and the pressure of the party if you break away from them. So this combination, this confluence of events leads to this awful result.
They made you disabled to think yourself. My whole body just become a robot, just performed to do what I had been programmed to do. They made you genuinely believe what you are doing is for a good cause. It is little later I realized I shortened this man's life. That is equal to a killer.
It's a crime against humanity. It's abhorrent, and it needs to stop.
This is a new form of genocide, and it's using the most respected members of society to implement it. This is one of the central tests of our time. We can't avoid this any longer.